As Bandai catches us up to the east, feels like this time just keeps rolling around faster and faster. But yes, in a couple of weeks' time, pre-releases will be starting at your LGSs for OP14 EB04. We now have the full set revealed by Bandai, so welcome to my ultimate guide to OP14 pre-release. In this video, we're going to be covering event info, when the event's going to be happening, what you need to bring, some general tips for pre-release, and then I'll be discussing the cards in set and how you can apply their effect to a pre-release format. So firstly, event info, this is going to be running from Jan 9th to 15th at all Bandai stores and also all your LGSs that run organised play. It can be run as constructed or sealed. Constructed is the format we play every week on the sim, at regionals, at your locals. So most stores at this point do choose to run this as sealed, and the vast majority of this video will be focusing on sealed. If you want advice on constructed, consult a tier list. For playing, you're going to get the girl, I want to call her young girl, but she's grown up. She is just girl now. And also the Rainbow Luffy leader that you can see down here. This girl promo looks to be very, very good in especially blue-yellow Nami, but also maybe blue Nami if anyone's playing that still. And you're also going to get a pack of 2 pre-release cards. This is going to contain 2 random common or uncommon cards from the set. It's as yet unknown if this can include the EB04 cards, because we've not had something like this before. But these are going to look like this shoe here in the top right. Just a little stamp that says release event. Nothing too funky. But they can bling out your common and uncommon slots. Why not? And if you are lucky enough to win, you're going to get this full art version of Girl with the release event winner stamp. With this being pretty staple in Nami, and Nami looking to be, certainly once EB03 comes out, one of the better decks in the format, I think this winner version will go for a pretty penny, because this will be a foil version, whereas the regular one will almost certainly be non-foil. Moving on, what do you need to bring? If this is your first event, welcome, good luck, have fun. All you need to bring to play the One Piece card game is some sleeves, so you don't damage your cards, your playmat, some dice, a leader if needed, and we will be discussing that further on the next couple of slides, and also a set of 10 Don. If you can't get your hands on 10 Don, don't worry. People at your locals will be able to give you them, or your store might have some spare, or you could even just use backwards cards in sleeves if it came to that. So don't stress about this if you are brand new to the game, but this is what I would advise bringing. And sealed, some information on the sealed format. So you're going to get given 6 packs of OP14 EB04, and from those, you're going to open them and make a 40 card deck. Normally in constructed, deck's a little bit bigger, but for sealed, we just play with 40 cards because you're not going to get as many cards, so it makes the decks a little bit more consistent at least. There are no color restrictions, so if you chose to play mono red Zoro from OP01, you can run green cards, you can run black cards, you can run whatever you like. And there are also no card count restrictions, so if you pull 6 of the same vanilla, if you get them in every pack, you can include them all, no problem. And the rest of your pulls are your sideboard, and some people don't know about this one. So say you play round 1 and there's a card that you didn't read properly. It's locked to a leader that your leader is not. You can take that out and replace it with something else before round 2. This just serves to make sure your deck is as fun as possible in every round, because nobody wants to have a dead card. And as card game players, we know how hard reading can be. So in terms of general tips for the sealed format, board control is important, so developing your own big guys and removing your opponents when you can efficiently is really good. This means that effects that can reduce power are far more useful than effects that might reduce cost, because power-based removal works in battle, and most of what you're going to be doing in pre-release is battling. Finding the balance between pressuring their life and also taking their board when it's efficient is just going to be something that comes with time. The more you play the game, this is one of the fundamental skills of the game. Blockers are invaluable, but be aware of what your opponent can do to get around them. Do they have unblockable? Do they have potentially cards that might rest those blockers? Do you need potentially multiple blockers to play around some sort of card that might interact with a blocker? Knowing what's in the set is invaluable to working out the best line to play around what your opponent might do. Know when you've lost the board. This is true in constructed as well, but setting up to win the game in a couple turns is just as important in sealed. You don't have to kill every character in your opponent's deck, you just have to kill their leader. So sometimes you will lose the board either due to your characters being worse, not having enough counter, maybe they got a lucky trigger, whatever it may be. Knowing when to pivot and just try and take your opponent out in a couple turns is key. And in Sealed, when attacking effects are even stronger, because in Constructed, not all decks, but a lot of decks like to do some on-curve removal, and there are even some decks that focus entirely on removal, though those are less popular at the minute. But in Sealed, your opponent's going to have far, far less removal. Even if they do have 1 or 2 removal pieces, the odds of them having them at the right time is much lower. And when cards can't be removed, that makes when attacking's even better, because you're likely to potentially even get multiple uses out of when attacking's. Where in Constructed, you might not even get one. Now, in terms of the Sealed format, there are 2 ways that stores will do this. Some stores will let you choose any leader that you like from your binder, from your boosters, whatever. Most stores at this point will use the Rainbow Luffy leader, though. This is given out at every single pre-release event, so everyone will have a copy of this. And he's a bit different. He can only be used for pre-release events. And he's considered a leader with all colours, names, attributes, and types. That means that you can use the effect of all of your type-locked cards. For example, this Jaguar D-Saul up here. Trigger says if your leader's Nico Robin, you can play this card. Well, Monkey D. Luffy has every name, including Nico Robin. Perona says if your leader has the Slash attribute, you can do a thing. Well, Luffy up here, he has the Strike attribute, but he is considered to have all attributes, according to the rules. So he counts as having Slash, and you can use Perona. And my favourite one, as ever, the Kung Fu Dugong. If you have a Kung Fu Dugong in play, other than this character, he gains blocker. Well, Luffy has every name, including Kung Fu Dugong. So your Dugong would become a blocker. And the reason why so many people enjoy Rainbow Luffy for this format is that it makes more of your card pool viable. In every set, there are a ton of cards that just say, if your leader is a Don Quixote pirate, if your leader is a warlord, if your leader is multicoloured. And this Luffy will work with all of those sorts of effects, so it makes deck building a little bit more interesting. However, if your store is not doing that, then these are some of the best leaders. Broadly, I would just play Red Sanji at this point. He gives everything rush. It's kind of just broken. You don't have that many powerful on-plays in pre-release, certainly not compared to how you would in Constructed. So the fact that this can't hit like massive characters, you're not going to have a ton of them, and also important on-plays, just being able to give rush to a bunch of vanillas is often enough to just beat your opponent down. But if you don't want to play Sanji, Zoro and Yamato are other aggressive options, or if you want to play a defensive option, Bonnie is about the best. But what about the new leaders? Well, be honest, they're all pretty type-locked. Law needs you to have supernovas. Crocodile is kind of just not very good. He needs you to have Baroque Works characters, and really he needs you to have a playset of Secret Crocodiles. Dofi needs you to have Don Quixote Pirates characters. Moria, I just don't think he's very good at this format anyway, but he also needs you to have Thriller Bark characters. Boa is not going to get her burn effect, and you're also going to get less triggers, because we're playing Sealed. Jinbei, he's okay. You can give a bunch of dons to your leader at the cost of your hand, but your hand is usually a pretty precious resource in pre-release. You're not going to have as many draws as Jinbei does in Constructed, so this effect's going to be harder to use. And I think the best of these is Mihawk. However, I still don't think he's as good as, certainly, Red Sanji. If your opponent does happen to be playing a Slash leader, so if they're playing Rainbow Luffy and you're not, cool, you're a 6k. Or if they're playing Zoro, but there's not many Slash leaders that are relevant for this format. And whilst restanding 3 dons effectively for free is a solid, it's a solid option, you can just swing 8. I think broadly giving everything rush is going to be more efficient, because well, if you were restanding 3 dons to swing 8, you could also just give your 6 cost 8k rush and attack for 8 without having to rest anything. So I do think this Mihawk is worse than Sanji, but he's not that bad if you want to try a new leader. So what do we want to include in our deck? Well, at an overview, you want to include lots of 2Ks because they are more counter. Who would have thought? If you want to counter out of big swings, 2Ks are twice the value of 1Ks. What a treat. Vanillas and cards with vanilla stat lines will cover these 2 points at the same time. Basically, big character equals good. Who would have thought? Swing into your opponent for big numbers makes them have to give you more counter. And if they don't have 2Ks, that can force them into incredibly awkward situations where they've got to give you multiple 1Ks, or even take lives when they really don't want to. Blockers just give you versatility. You can swing with them, you can leave them up, you can play them late game to deny your opponent the win. Most blockers in the set are always worth playing. There are a couple that might not be, but blockers just give you versatility in your gameplay. And then finally, the most obvious one, powerful cards. I've got a couple of slides at the end of other cards that might be very powerful, but take a look through the set yourself. You might disagree with me, you might even find something I've missed. That is a very powerful play to include in your sealed deck. After that, you're going to have to use your intuition to fill out the final slots. You're probably not going to have 40 really good cards in your packs. There's a lot of chaff, there's a lot of things like these things that we'll cover on the next slide. What to avoid? Attacking units with under 5,000 power. An example of that is this Hatchan over here. He's okay, he's good in Jinbei, in Constructed, but in Sealed, you've got to put 2 dons on this guy every turn. And if you play this on 1, that might feel pretty good on 3, but on 5, when you want to play a 5 cost, this Hatchan's just sitting there, and he will just sit there for a lot of turns. And at the very worst case, you could just put this 2 don on your leader, and just swing a bit bigger. This guys like him often don't get very much value. Combo pieces with few targets, and an example of this is this VV. This VV has realistically 1, viable target in the set, so it's not going to happen. As a result, cards that have 1 or no combo pieces, I mean, well, what's the point? The odds of you having, even if you have 1 VV and 1 of the Chakra Impel, which is the target, in your deck, the odds they're both in your hand at a time when you can play this VV and it's a good play, quite low. So, personally, don't think this VV is worth it. Archetype lock cards, for example, EB05, sure, you can ramp it on as active, but then you're stuck with a 4-1, and that's not very good. In Doflamingo, this card is exceptional, but we don't have Doflamingo's leader effect, so you're not going to get the on-KO. Your opponent's just not going to kill this. So it's effectively a 4-1. You can tell why that's not very good. And finally, Searchers. Searchers just don't hit. In Constructed, you design your deck in a way that if you were to play this card in your deck, you'd be including a lot of Straw Hat Crew or Supernova type cards. Well, in Sealed, it doesn't really work like that, because you get what you're given, and a lot of the time that's not going to be, 50% plus Supernova or Straw Hat Crew type cards. There are exceptions. The 1-cost Arlong sort of defies 2 of these rules in this set, because he's a Searcher and also a small attacking unit, but, it is what it is. He's just very good, and we'll talk about him later. But generally, Searchers avoid. In terms of the 2Ks with effects, we do have 9 uncommon, 2 rare up here, that's these 2 green ones, and then 4 common 2Ks. And so they're mixed bunch. Megalo, excellent. Being able to play for 4 dons for a movement 8k power unit is insane. This would be good on a 1k. I'd play this on a 1k. I'd wear that on a t-shirt. But yeah, this is an insane 2k. Kikunojo, not so much. She's very good in Mihawk in Constructed, but unless you want to play Mihawk in Sealed, I don't think this card's very good. In terms of the uncommon ones, Koala is not very useful. You can play her to pre-jack 2000 power, but it's not really going to be worth it. The Human Drill's alright. If you can play him down in advance, you can rest a blocker with him. Treble's effect is effectively being a 5/5 vanilla. Miss Golden Week and Wisp Wednesday are completely useless. The Gorgon Sisters and Shakuyaku have interesting effects. Shakuyaku will just get you a cycle, which is great. But the Gorgon Sisters, you're going to struggle to have 3 Amazon Lily or Kuja Pirates cards in your hand, so don't rely on this effect coming up. But the fact that these are trigger plays in Rainbow Luffy is enough to include them. Odin's actually really solid. He's a 4/5 2k that has 7,000 power on your opponent's turn, making him very difficult to take out. And your opponent's just not going to bother taking this guy out, because the value you get from attacking 5, it's not worth them investing swinging 7 into it. And as a result, you just get a guy that sits there and swings every turn. This is one of the best 2Ks in the set, along with Megalo. And also Bartolomeo. He's a blocker that's a 2K. He fills every emergency situation you need. He's either counter, or he's a blocker. What's not to love? In terms of these common ones, Miss Merry Christmas is completely useless. Wandatsumi is basically useless, because you're probably not trashing cards with an effect. We're not playing Jinbei and Sealed anyway. Kumasi can give you a trigger, which is okay, but the amount of Thrillerbark Pirates relevant targets in your deck is going to be fairly low, so don't count on it. And Terracotta gives 2 things unblockable. Which I mean, if you have Chaka and Pell on the board, great, but if you don't, it's a 2k. Moving on, we also have 5 vanilla 2ks, and these have been massively reduced in number. Typically in each set, we would get like 12 vanilla 2ks. I think last time we had 11 because there was a purple one missing, but now we're down to 5. However, these have been changed in rarity from uncommon to common, so you're probably going to get 1 copy of each of these, and these are just solid plays. If you get to your 5 on turn, you don't have something better, dropping Mr. 9, it's fine. You've developed a body, and developing board is very important so that you can pressure your opponent adequately. Broadly speaking, I think the vanilla 2ks and Megalo, Barto, and Odin are very good. Shakuyaku and Golden Sisters, not bad. The fact they can play themselves out in Rainbow Luffy is lovely. Most of these common ones are pretty much useless, and a lot of these uncommon ones are too, but you're going to likely include most of the 2ks you pull regardless. And here's a comparison of the 2ks in the set, but it is a bit different because the ratios of the number of cards in this set is slightly different to OP13. In general, we actually have slightly less uncommons in OP14 in total. Not just 2ks, like total cards in the set, but there are way more rares in the set, so your likelihood of pulling each individual rare is lower. And the same goes with commons, although that's to less of an extent, because commons are, well, common. On average, I think you'll get more 2ks than OP13, and if you do pull on the upper end of this range, like 13 or 14, you're probably not going to need all of those. You're going to be better off cutting some of the weaker ones for more powerful plays. Vanillas. This slide is slowly becoming smaller and smaller as the sets go on. We got 3, and honestly, Oars is a bit expensive. 810 with no other effect. It's alright, but it's not crazy. Diamante and Apu are great. There's not many other 3-don plays, so you might as well play Apu. And Diamante, I mean, 6-8 vanilla, it's fine. There's better options, but you will be including this in your deck. Moving on to Vanillish cards, and there are a lot more of these. I want to start with the 5-7s, because these are a real mixed bunch, but most of them are pretty good. I think the X-Drake is the best, gives you anti-removal for your Supernovas, mainly himself, but, you know, it's pretty nice, and giving minus 2000 every turn when attacking, for such a low cost as Don X1, is very efficient, and in the same way, Virgo is equivalent. Like, being able to power down your opponent's units is going to give you so much of an easier time playing board, that the value of these two in particular cannot be understated. These are some of the most powerful cards for you to establish on 5, by far. Isho, because he's a Kuzan card, he has good effect. He has the same when attacking as X-Drake and Virgo, but instead of doing Don X1 or Don -1, you have to trash a card and have Don X1. So this is expensive, but it can be worth it. The on-play, I'm not sure is worth it. Trashing 2 to make your opponent bot 2. I mean, you're going even, so if you think you're ahead, it can be okay, and he's still a 5-7. You don't have to do this effect, so you're going to include Isho, but he's a good bit worse than X-Drake and Virgo. Bird Neptunian gives you a Don every turn. It's great. It's a 4-7 effectively, and every subsequent turn it becomes more efficient. And then when attacking, if you have accumulated the Infinity Stones, you can maybe rest something. Miss Doublefinger is basically a vanilla. She's going to be a 5-7 somewhat of the time. It's okay. And then Boa does draw 2 trash 1. Simple bit of consistency. Moving up to the smaller characters, Absalom and Ryuma are both slightly annoying for your opponent to deal with and have triggers to give you bodies. They're also some of the only good things to be doing on 3, other than swinging with your leader. So these are definitely going to make the cut. Bluegrass only gives you a draw 1, trash 1, unlike in Kuzan, of course. But draw 1, trash 1, still not bad, and it's a vanilla stat line. Mr. 3 is very hard to deal with, as long as you can build up your trash. You can just negate KO, and that includes KO'd in battle. If you are a newer player, when these cards say if this character will be KO'd, that includes battle. And moving over to Kaido, I suppose, is a nice segue. This card's ridiculous. Don -2 is expensive. However, for that cost, you get a 9k rush guy, and you get to rest to 7. So you have a decent chance of taking out your opponent's board. And on top of that, your opponent is not going to be able to deal with Kaido. If they KO him either with an effect or just in battle, you can do Don -1 to just keep him on the board. And that's an unlimited amount of times, which is just ridiculous. The sticking power of this card is bonkers. The other 7-9 is pretty bonkers as too. This one's especially bonkers in Red Sanji, because you can give this rush. which is even better than his effect in Mihawk, right? You immediately come in, rest a 7k base power unit, whatever you like, a blocker, the threatening character on the board, and then you give them the -1 in their turn. This is bonkers in Red Sanji, but pretty good in Rainbow Luffy too. Rosante and Law, you're probably not going to get the on-play very much, but it is just a big blocker. That's pretty good. And then you got these three who are a little bit rarer in the SR and secret slots, but all of them are very, very powerful. Moria is almost certainly going to be online because there are a good enough amount of Thriller Bark targets. Even if you're just healing like a 2k, that's still pretty good. Jinbei is bonkers on 10 and one of the only ways to deal with things like Kaido and Shanks efficiently. Being able to bounce them back to your hand. Are you going to be able to give this rush? A lot of the time, no. If you can, brilliant, but yeah, a lot of the time you're not going to be able to give this guy rush. But even just being a 10-10 that draws 2 and bounces 7, I think is good enough. And you can also just play him as an 8-10 vanilla. If I remove my face, Crocodile is insane, but you're probably not going to pull this card because it is a secret. But if you do, like Kaido, you can just keep bringing him back when they KO him. And he also stuns a guy. Pretty good. Yeah, maybe not this one, though. This is... This is one Vanillish card that I'm not sure we want to run this one. Bouncing a character, brilliant. Trashing your hand, less so. Chump Blockers. Chump Blockers are great. We love a Chump Blocker. It's a cheap... Chump Blocker just means a cheap blocker. Usually doesn't have anything other too crazy going on. And then you can just use it to block a hit and not feel too bad about it because you haven't invested too many dons. Bartolomeo is the best of these in my eyes because it is also a 2k. So it fills multiple roles. Sindri and Salami both have some triggers. Slightly different triggers, but still good ones nonetheless. I think if I had to pick between them, I think I prefer Sindri because you can actually trigger out offensive characters, alternatively. Buffalo's got a bit of sticking power. If your opponent rests, you can negate that. Putting the opponent's attack effect is probably not going to be live. 4 events to get in your trash is a steep ask. Certainly early game, this isn't going to do anything. But it's still just a 2-cost blocker. And then over here on the left, these 3-cost blockers are a bit more awkward. Because 3-Don is sort of approaching the point of investment where, like, these two come out for free, the Sindri and the Salami. But Kamazo and Vista, you kind of want them to be doing something else. And they both are, but what Vista's doing is, I just don't think, very good. And what Kamazo's doing is pretty good for the kid deck, but in sealed, not so much. It is nice that they can attack for just 1 Don's investment, and you're probably going to include these. But I would prioritize, for example, the Buffalo or the Pudding even before these two. Sukiyaki gives you a Don every turn. If your opponent can deal with this by resting it and killing it, it's going to gain less value. But if your opponent can't deal with this card, you can easily get the 3 Dons you invested back over time. Only in Rainbow Luffy, though, because you do have to have a Land of Wano leader. Moving on to great blockers, Babe and Gem both get you a bit of extra value. Babe with his on KO. And Gem sometimes will draw you cards, although bear in mind that it's not as easy as in the Croc deck to have a character with a cost of 0-8. Kid can play something else, but more so he's just a 4-5 with blocker. Decent stat line. And Hannibal, you are never using this on play, but a 5-6 1k with blocker. I mean, that's not too bad. We've already talked about Law. 6-8 stat line is bonkers. And the fact that this will sometimes ramp you a Don and draw you a card is just incredible. Jinbei is a similarly large blocker, but can also play out something else that's green when he goes down, although there are few targets for his effect. And this is colour locked, even though colours don't apply to your leader in sealed. And this Nami is just a wonderful closer. The gaining 5 Dons at the end of the turn, we sometimes play counter events, but that's obviously focused on the RG Luffy leader. But the fact that this is a blocker that can just rest 2 of your opponent's guys, if they've got 2 blockers, you rest them both, you go for game. If they've got characters you want to take out, you rest their characters, take them out. Brilliant. And then you've got a blocker to defend your characters. This Nami is cracked. Underwhelming blockers. Shirahoshi, there are just so few meaningful targets for her effect. A 4-cost chump blocker that draws 1 is okay, but I don't know, I'm not thrilled about this one. And Whitebeard's just quite expensive. 8-8, like, he has counter, it's okay. But this effect is barely ever going to fire because you're not going to have a Whitebeard Pirates focus deck. There's like 3 Whitebeard Pirates cards in this whole set, so this is just never drawing 2 and crashing 1. Now, moving on to events, there are 2 Activate main events that I think are pretty good. Ice Time could just buy you out of 2 whole hits, which is insane. Only in Rainbow Luffy, of course, because your leader does have to have the Navy type. But if you are playing Rainbow Luffy, this is an instant include. Shambles, I'm not so sure on this one. This is an interesting one. If your opponent does have a small character, it can help you take out their bigger character. But then their smaller character will be bigger, so you then can't take out that one. So the use cases for this might be limited. And if your opponent only has one character, well, it's completely useless. But the high roll on this event could be very, very high. Counter events, time for the counter attack and tries to pass me. They're just 1 Don 4k counters. They both have conditions, but those conditions are going to be live most of the time. Bullet string gives you 2k for the turn and then 2k more for the battle in Rainbow Luffy, making you incredibly tanky at the end of the game. And similarly, You'll Frighten Me just negates an entire hit. And also has a pretty solid trigger. I think if you pull any of these, you'll be happy to have them in your deck. And the fact that you're threatening these to your opponent is going to make their lethals just that little bit harder. In terms of hybrid events, and these are events with main effects and counter effects. For fun is a nice bit of removal and also 3k for your leader. I never bother to remember the faces of trash, can be a nice little rest at the end of the game. And also draws you a card, so even if you just want to take out board, this is not a bad one to have, and is obviously counter for your leader. Ground Death is counter for your leader or a character. However, this having 10 or more cards in your trash is not easy in Sealed. In Constructed, Crocodile's got 10 cards in his trash, like, I don't know, like turn 4, easily. In Sealed, that's not going to be the case, because the only cards that go to your trash are events that you activate, counter, and characters that die. So getting to 10, it'll probably be online by the end of the game. But there will be games where it isn't, so be careful on that one. The main effect being able to negate a character, though, is just too good not to include. And finally, Flame Dragon Torch. I'm not sure about this one. The Don -1 giving 4k for 1 Don is solid. And this can only buff your Rainbow Luffy leader, because we're not playing Kaido. I suppose you could buff 7 cost Kaido if you have that. But yeah, resting anything for 7 Don, it can come up. And I think this is good enough just as a counter event, that this main effect is just like an extra bonus. Now, other cards to look out for. And we'll start up here in the top middle. Mr. 2 and Hogback both summon a guy when they go down. That's great for keeping up your board tempo and making it such that your opponent has a harder time dealing with your board. Ran and Tashigi give you a bit of extra juice every turn. Ran giving you that free Don in your Rainbow Luffy leader, or just putting a Don on herself as a Kuja Pirate's character. And Tashigi, especially if you have cards that you don't mind resting, can just get a bunch of extra power and is very hard to remove for your opponent, because it's effectively a 5/8. Both of these cards are very, very good. And both of these Peronas are very, very annoying at slowing your opponents down. Perona, the green edition, being able to stun 2 things is ridiculous, and again has that on KO similar to the Bon Clay and Hogback, where you can summon something else. But the yellow one's no slouch either. Stun something immediately, can be played out with all of these Thriller Block type triggers. And stunning a 6 in Sealed, that's most of your opponent's units. People don't tend to play a ton of characters bigger than 6, so this Perona hit's pretty damn high. Rayleigh is only usable in Rainbow Luffy because Red Sanji is not multicolored, but this is one of the only removal options in the set, and certainly one of the best. And Monet is just a good card. It ramps you a Don in Rainbow Luffy, but even if you're playing Sanji, you can't give it Rush, but draw 2 Trash 1 and ramp 2 on KO is not bad. Now, King in Red Sanji is just a Rush 6/7 that can't be removed, basically, which is still solid. However, in Rainbow Luffy, this card's bonkers. It's a 6/7, and it, yeah, funny, that ramps 2 Don every single turn. So if you have some Don minus effects, well, great, you get freebies back from King. And even just at a baseline, you play this on 6, you're at 10 next turn. Incredible. And then he has that same effect as the Kaido we discussed earlier, that if he would be KO'd, you can just return a Don instead. Insane. Along as the searcher I mentioned way earlier, if your leader's a Fishman, so only Rainbow Luffy, you can search for anything with a cost of 2 or more though. So like, even though this is a 1/3 brick, the extra consistency this is going to give you in your deck is going to be worth the investment. Coffin Boat is ridiculous in Rainbow Luffy. It's a 1 Don cycle 1. And then every turn you get 1 Don back. And we've just talked about some really good counter and hybrid events. So having that free Don from the Coffin Boat is going to be brilliant. Now, in terms of some really powerful top end, Zoro is one of the best rush units and can make it easy to take out your opponent's board. Law is just a big rush guy and can save you in a pinch. Boa is absolutely broken in Rainbow Luffy. You heal, they burn, you've got a 9-10, what a treat. Even as a trigger to play out a guy if you want. Mihawk is a bit awkward because you can't rest him immediately like you would in Green Mihawk, so he's got to stick there for a turn. But he does let you turn a brick into a 2k, and then once this guy has sort of sat there for one turn, he gets more and more and more value as the turns go on. So if you think it's going to be a long game, maybe you're playing Green Bonnie, this Mihawk, very powerful. Doffy, equally so. Stunning 3 guys is just broken. That's absolutely a game-winning effect. If you've got a board and your opponent also has a board, being able to stun their entire board, attack with yours into their face, and go, next turn, I've got the same board. I've also got a 10-10, and you're going to have a tough time dealing with my board because your entire board can't do anything. This is a game-winning card. Absolutely. And Foxy's just okay. Resting a 9, draw 2, trash 1, it's efficient. It's nothing too insane, but it is efficient nonetheless. And activate main ramping a Don. It's not terribly relevant. This is more for the Foxy deck in Constructed. But in Sealed, this is still a good card. It's value efficiency, but nothing too broken. One I missed on my first pass through, so this is a last-minute edit, is the Scaled Neptunian. Some of you may know him as Oroko. The original Japanese name. This card is also very good. It's not quite as good as something like the 7-cost Zoro, because the Zoro has Rush anywhere, and also a really good when attacking. This guy's on play. You're probably only going to get a draw 1 trash 1, because there are not many Neptunians in this set. Maybe you'll have the Bird Neptunian, you'll get a draw 2 trash 2. Regardless, the effect's fine, and Rush character is better than not having any Rush at all, and you would be quite happy to play this card out, but it is weaker than options like Zoro. Now some sleeper picks. These are cards that are less powerful or less consistent than some of the other cards, but still decent. Senor Pink and Kinemon have a bit of sticking power in that they make it difficult for your opponent to take them out. Senor Pink, they might not want to return a Don. They might have a pretty good curve coming up, so he might just get to sit there, which is great. Kinemon always gives you value, and then on KO, he can be very tricky because you can rest one of your opponent's Dons, you can rest their character, you can even rest their leader. So it's going to be more difficult for your opponent to find the right time to take this out. Aladdin, and going back to what I said about Shirahoshi, you're still probably not going to use his on play. But the fact that he's a 4-5 that on KO gives you a card back, that's good enough to include in my opinion. Killer's going to be a mixed bag because there will be games where your opponent just deals with this, but they rest it with something, and then you're like, ah, cool, I wasted a card. But in games where your opponent can't deal with this killer, the amount of value he'll give you over the turns is going to be worth the investment. Cavendish is a niche rush option to keep an eye on. Nothing too funky, but he is a rush option that can close out a game if you just need that extra hit. Missile Sunday is type locked, and I did say at the start, avoid overly type locked cards. But I think there are enough decent Baroque Works targets, and the fact that this is just a 7-8, even if it doesn't summon both things, maybe it just summons like the 4 cost, that's still worth it. Although this is more of a risky pick. If you don't pull enough Baroque Works 4 costs, you probably wouldn't include this card. And Fisher Tiger, absolutely only worth playing in Rainbow Luffy. And you will end up losing some cards after him. But if you can counter early because you know you're going to play this Fisher Tiger, you can get some good value. And at the very worst, he's a bit of cycle and a 6-7. Okay, not too bad. Couple of cards to avoid in addition to the cards to avoid I said at the start. Kuro, there are no targets for this guy. Like, there's some 2 costs. Even in Rainbow Luffy, this is just beyond bad. Don't include this Kuro. And Monkey D. Luffy also way too type locked. Generally, though, going back to what I said at the start, avoid searchers. Avoid things that need a target but don't have that target. Really small dudes. And cards that are locked to an archetype that you can't take advantage of. Finally, some OP14 specific tips. I've said this for the past few pre-releases, and I'll probably cut this off if this is true next set. There's a high 2k count, so swinging 5 or 7 is probably better than 6. In the past, we used to have really low 2k counts for sealed, but that's just not really true anymore. Bandai's been increasing the amount of 2k, so I'd swing 5 or 7 when you're trying to deal damage 2k above. There's no unblockable outside of Terracotta, so even once you go to 0, there's a chance that if you just dump like 2 blockers, that could easily be enough, because Terracotta only gives unblockable to Alabaster characters, and there's only like 2 in the set. So, yeah, the Terracotta, not very relevant. So blockers and ways to deal with those blockers, either by removal or resting, is going to be very important in this set. Vanilla 2Ks have been reduced in quantity, but they have been changed to commons. So you should still get a fair few of them, maybe even slightly more. And that'll mean that your deck at least has a consistently okay play on 5. I think I'm taking first this time. There's a lot of really powerful 5 costs. If we go back to the Vanillish, this slide, cards like the 5-cost X-Drake and the 5-cost Virgo especially, but also some of these other ones, are just incredible. The amount of value you're going to get out of this power down cannot be understated. These are incredible cards to helping you control your opponent's board. And on top of that, if you can draw one of these Kaido or the Shanks, well, you've got a perfect 7 on turn. What a treat. So generally, I think I am taking first in this set. However, if you do end up with second, there's some nice plays on this slide. You can go with Ran, Mr. 2, Hockback, they're not bad. And then you could go into maybe a King on 6, or a Rayleigh to deal with one of your opponent's guys. There's lots of archetype lock cards and searchers, so separating the wheat from the chaff, that should be easy enough. What that means is, in purple especially, there's a bunch of Don Quixote Pirates cards that don't really work, even in Rainbow Luffy. And also in black, there's a lot of Baroque work stuff that isn't very useful. And again, in red, there's a lot of really weak Supernova characters that are designed for red lore. So you're going to have a lot of stuff immediately that is bad, and that's going to make assembling your deck just a little bit easier. And finally, there's low removal, and X-Drake, I suppose, is a pretty bad example because he has anti-removal anyway. But when attacking effects in this set are going to be even better than normal because your opponent doesn't have good ways to remove them. There are some ways to freeze. Things like the big 10-cost Luffy, the 9-cost Mihawk. There are good ways to freeze in this set. But if you don't get hit by those, and most of those are higher rarity cards, when attacking effects like X-Drake's Power Down, and even Virgo's Power Down, will just be insane in terms of value. So that's it. That's my guide to OP14 Prerelease. Hope you have fun. Hope you get some crazy pulls. Let me know what pull you're hoping for most in the comments. Personally, there's a ton I'm interested in. I was really set on like Mihawk. Like, I wanted to play Mihawk. But I played RG Luffy and that was really fun. But I'm also really looking forward to trying out Kaido, Purple Kaido. So anything that can go in those decks, I will be stoked. Thank you for watching. Good luck at your pre-releases and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.